And thank you for inviting me, and thanks for showing up this early in the morning. I hope the extra draw of the foxes outside got you here to go see those when you're done. So I'm Nick Balster. I'm in the Department of Soil Science. I have affiliate status in some various departments around campus. Do a lot of teaching. I received my tenure in teaching within CALS, which is sort of unusual. So I really have kind of a heavy teaching load. Kind of known as the prop guy amongst the students, so I brought some today because I want to start out a little unconventionally. I want to ask you a question. I teach soil science. It's my passion. I love soils. Not dirt, so call it soils, right? And I think I heard earthworm. Someone played with earthworm with a child this morning. I thought I heard that in the room somewhere. Who was that?
I'm just closing the door.
Oh, there's my earthworm person. Good. Just talked about earthworms last week. So I want to ask you a question. I have two pails here. These are the best pails we could find. The important thing is that they're the same volume. Okay? They're the same volume. And I want you to imagine that in this recycling can, it is full of clay. Clay soil, totally dry, uncompacted, unaltered by humans. And in this pail, I have sand. Uniform sand, totally dry, uncompacted, unaltered by humans in their native environments. Homogeneous clay, homogeneous sand. Okay? Now I want you to kind of look down or close your eyes if you want, because I don't want any peer pressure here. And I want you to tell me, which do you think is going to weigh more? The pail of clay or the pail of sand? Both bone dry, uncompacted, unaltered by humans. Okay, put your hand up if you think that the clay is going to weigh more. And they're both full. Put your hand up if you think the sand is going to weigh more. Okay, put your hands down. So, I had about 8 people say the clay. I had about maybe little 10 maybe that said the sand. Got a fair amount that don't care, which is great. That's what just authentic to my classes. That's good. But there's disagreement. Why do you think the clay weighed more? For those of you who voted on clay.
Same volume, finer particles.
Same volume, finer particles?
Less airspace between them.
Interesting. So we have more surface area between the clay, so there's less airspace. Let me ask you this question. Held up those two pails, clay, and said, we'll get to the technology, I know. Well, I got to talk soils. We'll hold up that pail of clay, that pail of sand, but now they're totally saturated. All the airspace in them is totally saturated. Who would say that the clay weighs more? Who would say the sand weighs more? Oh, different now. All I've changed is the water and the airspace. Okay, I'll get to the punchline. The clay is lighter when it's dry. And that's because of all that airspace in between those tiny particles. The clay has a higher porosity than does the sand. This is why when the river is coming up, we don't throw clay bags down. Because the clay bags, if they were dry and the river hit them, they'd fall away. If they were wet, we couldn't pick them up. The reason that we don't all agree on that, and it's just like my students, the reason, and I was one of those too, the reason we don't agree on that is because for most of our lives we heard when people say, I have a heavy soil, they're usually talking about clay. And they're usually interacting with the soil because it's wet, which makes it heavy. It makes it hard for the plow to get through, hard for you to shovel, heavy for you to carry around, because all that pore space is full of water. The reason I'm talking about this is that these are the preconceptions that plague my classroom. And I teach a variety of things at the university. And one of my bread and butter course is soils, and it's for non-science majors. So I get close to 100 students in class. The challenges I have are one that I just demonstrated to you, is that they've interacted with this media. They call it dirt, okay? I don't call it that, but they interacted with the soil for pretty much all their lives. Since they were, most kids, sometime they've interacted with soil. So they bring these preconceptions, these misconceptions to class. And these are embedded, these are deep. These are things they've heard over and over again. And then I couple that with the fact that I'm teaching non-majors. So I get students from all across this campus with a variety of backgrounds. And so you layer on top of these misconceptions or these preconceptions this diversity of my classroom, and then it brings in another challenge. And then the other thing that has been a phenomena that I'm seeing more and more of, certainly it's not unique to UW-Madison or not new. It's certainly happened within the last decade, this explosion of urban kids coming into our classroom. As our demographics shift in the United States and around the world towards more urban settings, people are moving out of the rural environments and our urban settings are growing. A lot of students are coming into my classroom that haven't seen or interacted with a garden. They haven't had a grandparent take them out fishing, or they haven't been out in that natural world much. Theirs is an urban world. And soil was something you got rid of. You vacuumed, you got off your clothes, you came in, you got screamed at if you had soil on your clothes. You didn't want soil. And we've worked to make our life so not to interact with that stuff out there because it's dirty, that they come into this kind of this sterile idea. So I have a lot of these things that, and when I first started teaching, I just start hammering into the material. But then I realized, man, if I don't address these things and really appreciate these aspects of my classroom, nothing I'm saying is very effective. They might be getting it for the exam, but regurgitating it to me. But for deep understanding, for changing their conception about something, didn't really do much. So from early in my teaching, I've done scaffolding, and before I knew the sexy term to use, okay? And I like to think of it in terms of not so much I'm scaffolding it, but the learners are building this scaffold with me. And what I mean is I'm trying to break down my learning, break down the knowledge in the classroom to what are they bringing to the classroom, what's their experience, and then hopefully build up, scaffold by scaffold, build up some new ways of thinking, some new ideas that challenge the preconceptions, and maybe have them think about that media differently. I also subscribe to Bloom's taxonomy. Nothing new for you guys in the room. I know you've seen this, but these are sort of concepts that I have in my mind when I'm planning my classes, when I've planned them in the past. And then this is the final one, of which I do all the time, backwards design. And before I knew, before Wiggins and Mateague came out with the name and made it very popular, I'm sure a lot of you were doing this, or a lot of you do this in your life. I was doing it too. Wasn't doing this too well, the assessment part, but I was certainly thinking about, where do I want to go? What do I want this class to, end up? Where do I want it to end up? And then through assessment, finally starting to plan what that's going to look like so that it feeds back on the learning outcomes. So backwards design, and that's become all the rage. Well, to give you some insight into how that looked like early on, when I would teach, and this isn't too far distant in the past, I don't do this anymore, but I'd spread out. I'd spread out on my tables, I'd spread out on the floor. I see some of you nodding. You probably do this too. All the resources I'm going to use, I label them with little post-it notes, or before post-it notes I had little index cards I would put on each of the, and it was kind of just mapping out how the classroom was going to look. How were we going to flow through the learning? What kind of medium, what kind of props I was bringing in, what exercises I was going to do. Get it all out, come back from class, put it all away, all in its places, and then the next day get out the next one and do it. And needless to say, most of it gets put where it's supposed to go. Some of it doesn't, and over at the end of the semester, a shambles. So I transitioned to this method, where I started building binders, and I have a slug of these binders, and then the binders were organized by topics and concepts, and I'd go to a particular topic. I love these things. I went to, I invested, I'm sure, Home Depot, or not Home Depot, but Office Max was able to open up new stores by all the money I spent on binders out there. So I'd come out with these big bags full of binders, and I'd put all this stuff in binders. I'd find a new article, I'd find a new, something I'd see online, I'd print out the web page, all kinds of stuff, and I got shelves full of this stuff. Well, I'd run out of binders, and then this would start being the filing system, and then I would go, where was that thing? And I'd pull something off here and all over. Well, one day I was walking through my lab, and I had a new student, and she was using the tool, Scapple. And this is the advertisement that you see on the web. And she was using this tool, and we were talking about her research project. We had just been talking about it, and I saw her kind of organizing her literature, and I said, so what is that? And she said, that's 15 bucks. And I said, what are you talking about? So we started talking about it, and I said, well, you can put your literature on there? You can start to, because I was thinking, this is what I've been doing, but in a very, very disorganized and inefficient way.
15 bucks is like one of those big binders, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Yeah. So, if you have ever heard of, you might have heard of this tool, Scrivener. This is Literature and Latte. This is sort of their main deal. This is another organizational tool, mind map kind of, if you will, for writing. And authors use it. I think John used it for his thesis or dissertation. So this had been around for a while. This is another product they came out with. So that night, I bought it. I started using it. And this was one of my very first ones. What this tool allowed me to do was basically transfer that scaffolding, that backwards design, think about Bloom's taxonomy, but all in one place. And in one place that I was able to move things around and become much more dynamic. It allowed me to do backwards design in a dynamic way. As you all know, I'm sure a lot of you use backwards design. It isn't a static thing. You don't get to the end of it and then you're done, right? You go back, you reiterate. That's why sometimes I see backwards design presented, it almost looks like a static. You fill this box in, you get the assessment box, and then you get to what it's going to look like, and then you're done. Any of you that have done backwards design, you know it's an iterative process. You're trying out things that work, you change this, you might even go back to a learning outcome and say, that was the wrong outcome. I think I want to do this differently. So you're constantly going through. This software allows me to do that. But when I'm moving things, unlike on the floor or in my binders, this reorganizes it in an instant. I don't have to do all the reorganization physically on the floor or wherever on my desks. This pulls it all together. So I could then build in, what's my assessment going to look like? And then how's that assessment going to feed into the learning outcomes and then feed into informing how I'm doing the instruction. The reasons I liked it and still like it. I've been using it for almost a year now, is that it was simple. I'm into simple. I know that, that like John said, you can Google mind map software and find well over 50 products out there. Visio, Bubble Us, Mind Map, Mind Manager, I mean on and on and on. There's new ones coming out. In fact, there's a new one called The Brain that I'm looking at that's kind of, oh, I see a thumbs up there. Yeah, the Brain looks like a pretty neat one to check out. But if you go into these different mind maps, they all have their bells and whistles, their colors, their ways of the connecting. This software is pretty simple, pretty straightforward. I find that I'm kind of glad that I got into mind mapping through this software, because now when I'm starting to evaluate these other products, it's fairly intuitive to know what they're going to do when I started out simple. So if you haven't done it before, I'd really recommend, this is a nice step into this world. So simple. The other thing is this is offline. So you can you pay for it, you download it, it's resident on your computer. I'm sort of on the fence about the online world when it comes to mind mapping. There's lots and lots of mind mapping software. Lucid is another one it's sort of run like Google Docs almost, where you can mind map, with folks that are very distant from you and working on the same mind map. Great idea. I love the concept. However, for me, I'm a little nervous about getting the way that I'm teaching, because this is an iterative process. Sometimes I have little boxes, I don't know if you can see, they're called risks. I'll put in my teeth, I'll say, this is a big risk, but I'm going to try it. I don't know if I want that to get out there, especially if I was an assistant professor or something like being evaluated. I want to try that risk and then evaluate it later. So it allows me to do that. It allows me, mind mapping now allows me to really assess my assessment, if I could use that term, if you know what I mean. Assessing my assessment to see if it really is truly connected to other things, or if it's just kind of sitting out here as another box that doesn't do anything. The drop and drag features I love in the mind mapping. Anything that's on my desktop, I can drag into here. A text document, a photo, a picture, anything that's on the desktop, you can drag right into Scapple and use it that way. And I'll get back to this, it provides a platform for conversations, and I'll show you what I mean in a moment. So this is now what my mind maps look like. So this is probably a week-long lecture period of 3 classes. We're going to talk about physical properties of soils. I have my learning outcomes right at the top, and then this moves into how I'm going to structure the activities. I blew up a little section of it here. So I'm structuring how I'm going to structure activities, what figures I'm going to use, maybe some pictures that I'm going to bring in. I can have some webs up at the top. I'm going to have a website that I want to make sure that I remember to check out before, because I wouldn't remember this year to year, so that'll remind me to check that out. What my assessment's going to look like, if I have a hands-on activity, where that's going to connect in, and it just it's just revolutionized the way that my planning is done. It's making it super, super efficient, and actually a lot funner. When I have that mess out on the floor, it's kind of, do I really want to pull all this mess out because I got to put it away? This is nice. I can just hit the little X and close it, and open it back up, and it's all right there. So I really, really like how it's really helped this pedagogy of mine. One thing now that I've done is I've taken this mind mapping software. This is currently how I track my graduate students. I don't know if you can see this, but I put their names up here. I have a magnetic board, and I put their years until their graduation, and then I plot on here, and those are the date, the months, and we plot when they're going to do their dissertation, when they're going to present, when they're going to have the first papers turned in, when they're going to be in the field, when they're going to graduate. Hopefully that's up there, and hopefully they follow through on that. and all that good stuff. That's a little close-up of it. And also, we track publications, so we track where our publications are at, you know, whether they're in draft or co-author. Wish I had more in the accepted column, but we're getting there. So I track those things. Now, what I've done is I've started mind mapping them with my students. So no longer do I use those physical things in my office, even though they're still hanging up there. I got to take them down. We do it all on mind mapping now. So we sit down. This is a new project we have. We're going to put in this will plug a trail of erosion. If you want to go out to Pope Farm in West Madison, you'll see this trail of erosion we're building. It's going to have some learning steps along the way, and these different stops. The student right now is trying to figure out how this is going to look. This is where it's gotten to. As we have developed it more, you can see that you can put colors in here, you can put different icons, but it's fairly simple. You can get other mind mapping software where you can do there's lots of others of bells and whistles. This has, you know, a pretty small palette of colors and things you can use. And this is my last statement, but this is why I really, really love it, is because I've moved away from this to where when I'm talking with a student or I'm talking with a colleague and we're focused on a product there on the table, I've moved away from that to this, where the mind map is open and we're talking to one another. We're talking about the learning. We're talking about what our thing is we're trying to accomplish. And then as that conversation evolves and becomes richer with their input, we go right back to that software and we manipulate stuff around, and that allows me to be much more efficient with the group. And it takes it's subtle, but it's been really powerful. I've kind of noticed this. It takes the focus off of their product and moves it towards something that's dynamic. And so we're in it kind of together as a team to create something dynamic, rather than here's the thing and I'm going to mark it all up, or we're going to really, you know, focus on that. If you know what I mean, it's hard to describe, but it's created a safer space for my students to actually talk about their work. So that's all I have for the introduction. I'll tell you that there's 3 little things that I'm frustrated with this software about right now. One is that as your mind maps get larger, I'll go back to this one. As they become large, if you blow it all up, which is one of the nice things about this software, you can blow it up and see the big picture. But if I was going to move, say, this figure, and I wanted to move it over here, it takes a lot of time to do that. The processing speed on the computer. I've got a fairly fast computer, and it seems to bog down when I do at this scale. If I zoom into here and I move stuff, no, it's fine. But when they get larger, that's one thing I have been frustrated with. You have to learn quick keys. So on Scapple, they have a little manager that you can get to pop up to help you with those quick keys, but still it's not the most intuitive with your other typical left and right click with your mouse and things that we normally use. There's other software out there, like the Brain, that I'm looking at, that are more in sync with how we manage our computer systems every day. And then the last thing, it hasn't been a big limitation for me. I'm starting to find it more and more, though, is the style. Like I said, it's a limited palette of colors. There's a limited amount of, you know, ways you can draw borders and whatnot. So that's been another limitation. But other than that, it's really revolutionized the way that I do my pedagogy, and I encourage you to look at it.